started and introduce myself and Katie. So I'm Hannah Clark. If you don't know me, I'm the executive editor for the Product Manager and the host of the Product Manager podcast. And I've got my co-host here, Katie. You want to introduce yourself,
Yeah.
Katie?
Hi, everybody. I'm Katie Sanders. I'm executive editor at the CTO Club. Maybe also from the QA lead. There's some people that we merged those sites. So I'm excited. This is my first workshop, and really excited to be doing this with Hannah because there's a lot of blend between product and CTOs. So yeah, I'm excited to get to know everybody. Welcome.
And I'm very excited to be working with Katie on this. If you don't follow her on LinkedIn yet, Katie Sanders, she's such a badass. She's got some great content. So I really am excited for you guys to get to know each other. And I'd love to introduce our featured speaker as well. We've got Drew Falkman here. Drew is a product leader, an advisor, an educator, focused on pre-seed to seed product strategy. He's streamlined early teams. He's optimized for product to market fit. He's done it all. He's a great friend of the publication. He's worked with us tons, and he's worked with me a lot, which tells you that he's a very patient man. So you guys are in good hands today. And he also experiences, he's got a lot of experience in web, mobile, blockchain, and AI products. So we have an amazing expert here. Drew, do you want to say hello to the nice people?
Hey everyone, super excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, it is going to be a sweet time. So we're going to be starting by busting some myths about vibe coding and reviewing some different perspectives that generally people are holding. You know, what's the myth? What's the fact? We'll cover some use cases of vibe coded apps that you can use for inspo in your journey today. The format for the workshop is going to be pretty flexible. So we'll have a use case you can follow along with, or you can kind of adapt it as you go with something that you're more intrigued by. Around the 30-minute mark, we're going to touch on the vibe coding tech stack and talk about some of the handful of popular tools that you might want to consider looking at when you're building and trying out the technology. And then we're going to start crafting a prototype, ideally from start to finish. And then once we build something, we're going to chat about the next steps and what you can do with your own prototypes once you're kind of ready to develop them further, whether you want to deploy them or use them as a collaboration tool. It will also have some time at the end for some Q&A. So if you have a question at any time, please enter it into the chat. So we're going to start by some myth busting. And I'll kick us off with the first question. And then my lovely co-host Katie will go through some myths and have Drew debunk them for us. So we'll start by setting some context. Seems like everybody is talking about vibe coding, and it comes up in like every LinkedIn post right now, including a lot of my own. And people either seem to be very excited by it or very scared or very confused. So let's talk about why vibe coding is so popular. Why is it so important right now? Let's get into the myths around that.
All right, so first myth, vibe coding is replacing engineers. Obviously, there's a lot of, I mean, in general, AI is replacing everyone's job. That's what it's saying. I would say that that's a myth and that maybe it's changing the engineer's job, but it is creating app-ready code, but it's certainly not completely replacing the job of an engineer. As always with AI, we want to keep a human in the loop. And so I would say, you know, nothing's going to get shipped without human eyeballs. And so I think we can bust that myth. If anyone feels otherwise, put it in the chat. But I think we can bust that myth.
Drew, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, it's something to be aware of and be cognitive of as an engineer, you know, that's coming down the pike. This could speed up your process. And as a designer and product manager and non-technical founder, you guys now have the ability to create MVPs and create and validate prototypes and do things and then hand it off to the engineers. But, you know, when you want to get into production level code, generally speaking, you know, pass an MVP in this day and age, certainly you need to be doing code reviews and going over and making sure that everything is tightened up, especially if there's any sort of compliance issues or anything you need to be aware of.
All right, well, let's move on to myth number two. So some people say the vibe coding is kind of a world outside of the dev cycle. So in other words, if you build something in a vibe coding app that you still like that it's not really usable and that you have to rebuild it completely from the ground up with a developer who's hard coding the whole thing. Drew, is this really the case?
Well, you know, the tools have evolved so much, and it's one of those things where it's literally changing every day. Like Claude just released a new sort of iteration of their code generation within the last month or so. And it's miles better than it was before. So it's continually improving. It does just like all generative AI stuff. It can hallucinate, it can do goofy stuff, it can do things that are unexpected. So as part of the cycle, right, it can work into the cycle and you can actually create these sort of code pieces and hand them off to engineers, but you really need to be conscious that they're going to probably need some reworking. You might need to reuse some components. And when we get into the workshop, I'm going to go over and show you what the code looks like. And I think some engineers, if there's any in the audience, might be somewhat surprised at how good the code actually is. So
well, that's good to know since we're going to be building a bunch in a few moments. Okay, another myth that I've heard a lot is that you don't need a PRD or a product strategy in order to vibe code a tool. Drew, Katie, thoughts on that?
I can go real quick. I know Katie, you wrote a post about this. Is that right?
I don't think I wrote a post about that one.
Oh, that was about
yeah.
the newness. Yeah. Look, you always need to think. I think what happens is sometimes people think like, if I'm vibe coding, I can just like jump in, open it up, and have an app tomorrow. And just like anything else, if you don't put any forethought into it, it's not going to be what you want. You want to think about who your audience is, who your target market is. You want to think about what your value proposition is. You want to think about what the core features and flows in the app are going to be. And so it's really worth your time to put together something. Now, the beauty of it is you don't have to create a 5 to 10 page PRD that defines the tech that's going to be used and that diagrams all the flows and all that. You don't have to think about that. You just want to outline what your vision is, what it is you're building. And in fact, I've come up with like a little vibe PRD, and it's like 1 to 2 pages. And it's just for you and anyone else who you might be collaborating with so that you're on the same page and that you can come at it with an organized approach and that your code is cleaner in the long run.
Well, good to know. Well, we'll move on to the next myth here about highly regulated industries. Now, Katie represents the CTO club. So did you want to take this this myth on, Katie?
Yeah, I think one other one I wanted to touch on is just like the thought that this is new and tell you like we've been vibe coding for years. We didn't call it that until recently, but copy pasting from GitHub or Reddit or Hacker News, wherever, like great engineers, like they solve problems, they search and pattern match and adapt and build. So I think this prompt is just the next evolution of what's always been there. And then Hannah, what was the other one you wanted to bust? The last one.
Just that like if you're in a highly regulated industry that you can't vibe code because it's not secure.
Yeah. Like obviously, when we think about like healthcare or finance, those are highly regulated industries. So it's just with any other industry, you want to make sure that you're like HIPAA compliant and all of those things. I know that LLMs can sometimes pull, and yeah, so just consider compliance issues if really in any industry, but I think that there's a little bit of an extra guardrail when you're thinking about healthcare or finance or something like that. So
yeah, I think it's kind of like a lot of different development processes where the vibe coding tools don't replace your personnel. They're just like a complement to accelerate the development cycle. But yeah, like a good rigorous code review process, it's probably more essential than ever now that we're kind of outsourcing some of that work. All right, let's talk a little bit about some use cases. It'll be fun to explore a few different ways that people are using vibe coding effectively right now. Katie will run this section of the show here and go through some of the use cases that were pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm off. Yeah, mute. Okay. So a lot of these I pulled from Reddit. Like when vibe coding first started happening, I wanted to see real world examples of this. Everybody was talking about it, but I wasn't really able to see anything that was successful. So I did an article about this, and one of the things we talked about was this person who built, I think it was like a niche soccer game organizer, just like a personal interest hobby. He was not a developer, but he understood how full stack apps worked. And he's always had to hire developers to bring his ideas to life. But as he started playing around with Lovable and Cursor and all these other things, he built this niche soccer game app, and it was just help his to organize his weekly games. And he ended up shipping this, and I think successfully, yeah, shipped a 100-line AI generated app profitably within weeks. I think was bringing in something like, was it Michael? Was it like $700 a week or something like that? Another example we found was this one called Workaid, it's a gamified task management powered by AI. So like revolutionizing your to-do list and with apps to make work feel like a game. So those were like a couple of successful examples that I pulled from Reddit, and we can link you guys to that Reddit post. There were a few more examples of that. And I think, a lot of people are just going to play around with this, but there are some people who are going to be really successful with this. And we've even seen, I think Reuters just did a thing about some really big valuations that are coming for companies that are using. There's definitely some profitability and success to be had, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, that's a very cool example. I did want to just interject quickly because we have a very good question from Katya.
Okay.
So I wanted to post this to Drew here. Katya says, I was wondering as a PM, would I even have to still create wireframes and mockups for the front end if I could just create it with vibe coding and then the devs can use my front end as a starting point for their own development?
Yes, 100%. In fact, I would say that it would be more difficult with vibe coding with most of these tools to try and implement an existing design because it's hard to sort of import screens and do all that. It's actually easier to sort of define it. And you can work with the generative AI to sort of get the look and feel right and all that kind of stuff, and then hand it off to them and they can make sure it's sort of in compliance with any design system or anything else that you're using.
Well, thank you for fielding that, Drew. All right. Sorry, Kate, to interject there. Did you want to get back to some of the use cases? I know you got a couple more up your sleeve.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if, Michael, do you want to share that we have one like use case from someone within our company. They created this layoff impact analyzer. Michael, I don't know if you wanted to share that as a great example that we
Yeah,
have built
sure.
internally. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So this is an awesome example that one of our colleagues used on their site where they are working for an HR publication and wanted to build a tool that folks could use to analyze the impact of a layoff if they were planning one. And so let me just share this real quick on screen. What we've got here is, okay, so here's the article where you can find this example. And what he's done is he's embedded his Lovable app, or his vibe coded app down here on the page. Oh, I've already opened it, so it's going to be, or maybe I'll try doing this in a incognito window. Can you still see the incognito window that I'm sharing?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So yes, so here is the embedded app, and so this is a tool that, yeah, like I mentioned, you can analyze your projected layoff if you're planning that. And the way he's done this is he's actually coded it so that, or vibe coded it so that folks who want to use this have to fill out a survey ahead of time. That way he's collecting data on people that are using it, which is something that he wanted to do for his own purposes. So once you've completed that survey, then the app brings you into this calculator. And so there are a few examples that he's got built into it. So if you're, at a manufacturing company and you're looking to lay off 200 employees, then you can select this example just to kind of see how it works. But essentially, you put in all these different details and talk about like, okay, how much knowledge do these people have? How much time would it take to retrain somebody for this role? And then you can calculate the impact of that layoff, and it'll tell you exactly, what kind of effect this will have. So this would be a great tool for folks who are working in HR, who are planning a layoff. And he's just given this out for free for folks who want to play around with it and give them feedback. But that's one example that we have just from someone on our team. And then I don't know, do you want me to go through the second example I could share, which is the polling tool that we were just using?
Sure. Yeah. And then after that, I want to share like a use case where it didn't go so well. So yeah, go take it away, Michael.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's go to Lovable. And so the poll that we were all using today to, let's see here. Where did my poll go? Yes, the poll that you all responded on today was built. I just coded it all myself. I have no experience coding, or very limited anyway. And so I built out this poll or this polls app basically, so that we could take voting from the live audience and display the results, instead of having to pay for something that did it. Because it's a lot of times what happens is apps will have that as a feature, but you got to pay into it, and you're paying for all these other features that you're not really using. I only really cared about the poll. And so I built this all so that I could create my own polls. I can give it whatever name I want, add as many options as I want. I can preview it before it goes live. And then I can either launch them from here or turn them off, get rid of them, etc. And then this is how they're displayed on screen. So you folks are voting on the poll on the app that I created. I'm not collecting any data from you, don't worry. It just lives in here. And yeah, so that's where we saw those results there. And that was something that I just threw together. I mean, I was actually working on it 30 minutes before this call, but in total, it probably took me, 1 to 2 hours just to put this together and give it some branding that I thought looked kind of nice. But I'm also not a designer, so don't take tips from me.
And while we're thinking ahead about discussions, I'd love to, I guess the 3 people who responded that they've built apps so far, I'd love to like hear about your experience or like what you've built. But yeah, we can save that for a little later. So yeah, I mean, we've talked about the upsides here. Of course, there's some people who are playing around in this and thinking that they are just like, never going to need anybody technical ever again. But there's this one example of this guy, Leo Jr. His post went viral on X, but he's the founder of EnrichLead, which is a tool that collects IP addresses and uses an LLM to generate sales leads. So he built the entire app using Cursor, and he said, very proudly, like 0 handwritten code. AI is the builder. You can whine about it or you can start building. Just like a lot of bravado and no humbleness. And so of course the internet chose violence, and within 48 hours the hackers took over and his subscriptions were bypassed, and his cost skyrocketed, and the LLM started hallucinating lead data out of thin air. And then so Leo had to post like an SOS to Twitter and say, hey, I'm under attack, random things are happening. I'm not technical, so this is taking me longer than usual to figure out. And so now he's learning how to code the hard way. So of course, again, just the lesson that you always need a human in the loop, and it's fun to play around with as a non-technical person, but you always need a technical person reviewing the code. So any other examples or use cases you guys want to go over? I feel like we've probably gone over enough to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there's anyone in the chat who knows of a great example that they'd like to share, or if there's any apps that you've seen that kind of originated with the vibe coding process, please throw it in the chat. We'd love to know more examples. It's great to kind of share some that we think are inspirational, especially as we kind of move towards our workshop portion. All right. Sorry, I'm just reading Michael's conversation with Graham here about the first vibe coding project. Actually, Michael, did you want to kind of give people like a quick rundown of like what that learning curve was like for you when you very first started playing around with the tools?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, like I said, I have very limited, coding knowledge, and so this was something that I feel like I see this sometimes where people will say something like, "Oh, I'm an ideas person. I've never actually built at something before," and that's 100% the camp that I fall into, because I'm often thinking about different ways that I could try to cut down on the internal process or do things without having to like pay for third-party apps, but actually building it out is difficult. So in response to Graham there, he was asking what the learning curve is like in practice, and for the tool that we're going to be using today, Lovable, and it's going to be similar across the other apps that are out there as well. It's honestly the learning curve is really gradual, really low, because there's like you're going to see, it's just text prompting. So you outline exactly what it is that you'd like to see, like the things that your goal for building the app, what the kind of outcomes you want to see. And then it'll like spit out some examples of what it might build for you. But you can also like provide additional details as well. So if you've got something that you're basing it off of, like for example, for this one, I said I want it to look like something like Slido.com, which if you're familiar with Slido is a polling app. And so you can use examples from the real world to base those off of. And then you can input your own branding and any other like requirements that you need the app to do when you're putting it in. And then once it's built out the initial iteration, it's also like that's not the end of it. You know, you can keep chatting with it. There's a chat mode, so you can ask it questions before it actually changes the code or builds anything in addition to that. And what I found worked for me too is when things got a little bit beyond my knowledge, I took some of the things that like the Lovable would tell me was doing, and I'd take that, I'd copy it to ChatGPT, and I'd say, explain this to me like I'm 5. And so it would dumb it down for somebody like me who doesn't understand all the technicalities, and explained it really, really thoroughly. So yeah, it was a really smooth process, and made it really easy to try building something like this.
That is so cool. And I hope that's very encouraging for those of us, including myself, who are starting like really from scratch. Yeah. I did want to bring up a question here from Tal. We're going to pitch this one to Drew. So Tal asks, what would you suggest is a good workflow for existing product companies? I'm a PM working at a startup. We have a design system and a working product with users. How do you think I can use vibe coding for specific features or ideas? And when would it go back to design, or will it skip the design and go straight to dev?
That's a great question. So I think like this whole workflow is 100% work in progress right now. You know, I think there are no best practices yet. It's still kind of the Wild West, like in terms of putting all this stuff together. But the way I would do it, if I were at a company, is I would skip design, but I would coordinate with the designer. So I would do like, and I'll show you my Vibe PRD. I would put something together that sort of talks about the screens and the elements. And I would make sure to get buy-in from the designers. And they can even be collaborators on this too. So remember, this isn't something we need to do in silo. We can all be looking at the same project and working on it together. And then what I would do is I would create it. There's no like magical way that I've heard of, at least with Lovable, to integrate design systems. Some of the other tools like Cursor is actually a lower level tool for this, because you can plug in the chats and everything, but you're really working in the code in like an integrated development environment. And it often requires like running command line things. So it's a little more technical for totally non-technical people, but it does allow you for a little more code integration and interaction. So that might be a better tool for this use case. But if I were doing it here, it will actually do a two-way sync to GitHub, which I'll try and show if we have time today. So you could do an iteration of a screen. You could post it to GitHub, and then your devs could pull it down. They could apply all of their components and design systems and push it back up. And then when you went back in, all that stuff, you should be able to see it. And it should hopefully, ideally work great.
That's wicked. We have time for one more question before we move into the workshop. This question is from Donald for Drew. What's your experience around vibe coding for something that is more cloney, in brackets, yet another task manager, versus something that is more unique, like a sonification of Google Trends data? So like, I guess, in other words, vibe coding for something that is more like a version of something that already exists in multitude, versus something that's a completely unheard of, never really been done before idea.
Yeah, that's a great question. So my experience in general with prototyping tools and vibe coding tools is that anything that exists is fairly straightforward. It can add them, it understands. You know, like the example, our sort of default example today is a travel app. It can do travel apps all day long. But when you get into something like sonification of Google Trends data, it's going to be more of a battle. And I would add, if you get into anything that's outside of, that's going to require like very custom sort of visualization tools other than your standard sort of UI elements with drop downs and buttons and things like that, you're going to struggle with these kind of tools, at least with Lovable, at where we are today. There may be other tools that will sort of make this easier, but right now those are kind of things you're going to need to pull devs in and work with if you're doing something crazy and really out of the norm.
Oh, sweet. Thank you for clarifying that. This is very exciting. We're about to get into the workshop stuff. So we'll get started with the tools here. Katie, did you want to kind of introduce folks to, like how we can get started, what tools we need to have up, etc.?
Yeah. I think Hannah mentioned a few times in the beginning for everyone to, if they can, have a login for Lovable. I know that there's a free version for that. That's what I have used. I think, Michael, did you use the free version as well? Yeah, you
Yes,
can
I
do
did.
pretty much anything, that you need to do. And I think once we actually get hands-on in here, you guys are going to be surprised to see it's just like using any other AI. You tell it what to do and then you iterate on that and you continue, and very similar to what Michael did. Sometimes, yes, I'm an editor on the CTO club, but sometimes the technical stuff goes over my head too. So that explain this like I'm learning it for the first time or explaining it like I'm 5 is a really great way to understand what you're doing when you're doing something that you don't understand. So you're going to be able to just go in there and ask it whatever question and it'll tell you. Cursor, I haven't used, so I don't know if that one, I don't think we told people to download that one, but for sure, if you can get Lovable and Superbase and then GitHub. And then in terms of these other ones, I don't know, maybe Drew, do you want to speak to like Cursor or Bolt or Bubble and like just your use of those if you've used those?
Yep, I can certainly talk to them. So Cursor is it's kind of like Lovable in the sense that you can chat with it, you can interact with it, but you can also write code. It's actually an instance of Visual Studio, which is an open source IDE that Microsoft created and they use for all their stuff. But everyone uses it now, excuse me, in the engineering world. So it's a little more technical. When I played around with it, and granted, it's been a few months since I've downloaded and played around with it, it would create a whole app, but then in order to get it installed, you had to go to the command line and you'd have to like create a React app and make it, you have to do some things that not everyone's going to be comfortable with. It's like command line stuff. But it's great. It's very powerful because you're in there with the code. And so, and the whole environment is made for devs. So a lot of devs that want to shorten their dev time, this can actually be great because you can use AI to sort of build out an interface first and then go clean it up and things like that. So it works very well in sort of the dev interflow side of things. Bolt is very similar to Lovable. It has its own sort of quirks and benefits and drawbacks. One of the things about it is it will do mobile apps, right? So Lovable is all just web apps. So if you want to compile something that's going to be in the App Store or in Google Play, then you want to use that app. And then another one is Replit that's sort of up and coming. People love this tool. I have to be honest, I haven't tested enough. I really want to do more with it, but it looks great. And then Bubble.io is like one of the OG ones, and it's more like I think of it more like as a web flow for apps. So you can, there are some sort of chat interactions you can use with prompts, but a lot of it is it has the components and things that you can drag and drop and move around and sort of edit your UI in that way.
Thank you, Drew.
And of course, you can code right in LLMs. You can ask, some people do this, but again, you have to get that code and know what to do with it to make it work and run.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
No, that's great. And I did want to mention, we saw Graham's comment. Where did it go? Just something to be wary of for people at existing product companies. To be clear with your stakeholders. Yeah, that's so true. Like when you see something that looks polished, you're like, oh yeah, this is good to go, and they'll ship it out when it's not actually workable. So, and we have some other cautions to consider that we'll go over at the end of the session. But that's a really good one, Graham. Thanks for calling that out. Okay, so Hannah has asked if anyone has any use cases to throw them in the chat. So if anyone has any idea, let's see. Abdul says which tools good appropriate for mobile apps.
I think we can cover some alternative tools towards the end too. So we
Okay.
got some, yeah.
Okay.
There's more and more. It can be like a long discussion, and just like every other environment, like people, I love Figma, I love this, I love that. Everyone has their preferences and whatnot, but there's lots of great tools out there now.
Okay. All right. Well, then let's get into the workshop part. And yeah, unless anyone has an app idea, I know that we have been thinking about one and we can play around with it. But if there's one that anybody's super passionate about or wants to see, or maybe has one that they're working on and they want to see our version of it, let us know. And yeah, but I'll let you take it away, Hannah.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, this is like an improv show. This is just to prove that we really are doing this live. This really is something you can do from scratch. Okay. So Brent says a networking manager for job searching. Someone says, can't give up my secrets. I get that. I've got one that I'm like, oh, I don't want to share it before it's patented. Let's see. Multi-tenant restaurant management app. Create a basic CRM with one customer record. Hey, some great ideas here. So let's see. I'd say I'm going to give Drew power of first refusal here. But if you did come up with some ideas, or if you are kind of like nervous to suggest yours and you have it in the back of your mind, you don't have to follow along with the same use case that we're doing. You can absolutely adapt the prompts that Drew's going to share to build the app that you want to see. But Drew, what's calling to you in this menu of ideas?
I like them. I like the idea of a CRM. I think that would be pretty straightforward. And I think Lovable could definitely handle that because it's, something that's been done. The property management, there's some interesting things. I think you're right. I agree with Maria and Brent, though. I think the job searching networking manager is kind of interesting. And I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like, but I think it's something everyone needs to get a job. So I think it's something everyone can relate to. So I think that might be a fun one to build. I'm getting more plus ones. So
all right.
Yeah, let's do that one.
Let's do it. Let's search for some jobs.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen now. All right. So first things first. Let's see here. All right. Are you all seeing? I'm going to go first into this Vibe prompt. All right. So are you seeing a Google Doc? Am I on the right page? Okay. So this is just a little prompt that I created. And really the purpose is, as I explained, is to think about, and I've saved this as a PDF. We'll put this up so that anyone can download it if they want it to start. The idea is just to put some pre-thinking into what you're building, right? So we're breaking it up into some major sections, right? A user story map, core feature list, screens and flows, data and APIs, and success criteria. So part of this is breaking down like who's our target user, right? And this is stuff that you can think about while you're putting everything together and while you're planning for your app. I'll just show you real quick. This is one that I did for the travel one. And my prompt is very simple. So I took the PRD and then I just kind of fill in some stuff, what it's going to be, right? This app was going to generate itineraries. So it's like an itinerary-centric travel app. So basically, you figure out what you want to do based on what you like. Outdoor things. I'm a foodie. I like to, I like city scenes. I'm very social. I like nightlife, whatever it is. And then it comes up with an itinerary for you. And then from there, you can tweak that. And then you can do your bookings all from there. That was sort of my idea, right? And so we spell out our target users, what some of the key features are. And again, the idea isn't, these are it's more prompt-like thinking, right? We don't have to spell out exactly what each feature is. Chat's going to do that for us, right? But we want to define it enough so that it can fill in the blanks And then, of course, when it does, which is what it generated, so you can see it's generated a summary for me. It's defined my target user and what the problem is and the context, right? And the user story map. So all these things are here for us to use however we want within the coding tool, right? So here's the core features list. Now, one of the things I've found is that when you get in and start building an app, the pre-thinking is absolutely key. If you start with, I want to build this app and put in all the things, even if it's very well defined, like, because we've got all screens sort of laid out here, it could work. Even if it's well defined, anything that's not specifically defined will be assumed. So you have to be very careful with that sort of thinking. So I prefer personally, in my approach, is to go in and write screen by screen. So I set the context in my initial prompt. I'll set the context, who the target user is, all this, and then I'll just sort of start the main screen or the main. If I have a flow of like 1, 2, 3 sort of screens, I might do that and then tweak it from there. I don't know if anyone's ever tried editing images in ChatGPT. I'm sure you have. And so you do your things. For example, I was helping someone create content for a website, and they do all kinds of mental health things. And one of them is sort of with addiction. And so they were writing a blog on having an alcohol-free holiday, right? And so I wanted to generate an image, and it kept generating images with wine glasses and wine bottles and stuff. And so I kept telling it, like, I don't want any wine glasses. So it would keep the wine glass, but then it would be filled with a clear liquid, like it was water or something, but still looked like a wine glass. And no matter what I did to the prompt, every time it would change, but it never could quite handle getting rid of the wine glasses. And so I had to like start over again to get it to work. And I did eventually get it, but the editing was more difficult than the initial prompt, right? So that's exactly the same how it is with vibe coding. So as much as I would love to do all this thinking, I don't think anyone wants to watch my thinking live. So I'm going to go right into Lovable and just sort of create this app and sort of make these things up as I go. So this is Lovable. These are, a bunch of different projects I've created over time. You see it'll prompt you some things if you want to make them. It doesn't just do apps. You can actually do, I've seen some gorgeous like landing pages people have created in this with images and colors and backgrounds and heroes and calls to action and all the stuff. So you can use it for garden variety websites and a bunch of other things. But we're going to do apps for this example. One of the other things is in virtually every environment that we've worked in the past, you have to create a project first, and then you like edit the project, right? In the case of Lovable, the way you create the project is you write the initial prompt. So what we're going to want to do, I want to mainly set who our target market is, right? So we're going to say, let's build an app to help with networking for people searching for jobs. Now, how defined do we want to be? Is this going to be targeted at executives? Is this going to be targeted? I don't know. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
Diana had chimed in and said, would be very cool if I could also manage correspondence around the postings. Okay, so this isn't exactly related to who we want to target, but tailor a resume for the specific role, draft communications connected to your email provider, and summarize all of the related activity around the job, then remind you to follow up. I guess, yeah, that's more than
Okay,
nitty-gritty, but I'd say
okay,
let's,
I like that.
yeah. But I feel like maybe we go a step below C-suite. So maybe just like some,
Okay,
senior level.
market is
Yeah.
mid-level
Mhm.
to upper management, not exact. Applicants who want to
Product managers is what people are chiming in.
Oh, product managers. Okay. All right. Our target is product managers, senior and up, who want to network with companies that match their skills and experience and also interests. This app will allow for easy finding of recruiters and managers who are currently looking to fill roles and track their interactions on LinkedIn or email. To start, let's build a homepage that prompts the user to enter their interests as well as experience to find potential matches. Now, one of the things is, since it's doing all the design and stuff, we usually want to give it some flavor and some feels about the design itself. So let's say we want this site to feel warm, but also professional. And
Drew, when you have a moment, we got a
tasks.
couple of ideas from the group here, but I don't want to interrupt your flow.
Okay. No, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
All right. So
Make sure
first,
I don't miss any ads.
yeah, Graham said, do we want to define the type of app that we need early on, as in like a web app or a mobile app? So I thought that was a good thing to call out at this stage to see if that's necessary at this stage of development, or if we can kind of make that decision later on. And then Diana had a whole list of some interesting and cool features that she's interested in seeing. I don't know that now's the time to prompt them, but I just want them to be on your radar.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we'll get into it. We'll add some more features and stuff too. All right, so that's a great note. So Lovable only does web apps. Now that said, you could do everything mobile, and there's articles out there online and stuff, and you could wrap it as sort of a progressive web application or a PWA, and then you could wrap that and ship it to an app store. So you could technically make it into a mobile app. The problem is it's not going to have a lot of the native features and integrations and things that you want without having devs get in there and do all the work. So if you want to build your stuff, it will be web. However, that is noted. Let's make sure it should be responsive so that users can interact with it on any device. All right.
We also had a question from Usman. Can you tell it to use specific programming languages or frameworks?
So Lovable pretty much just uses React. That's what it's designed for. So in this instance, no. Some of the other tools will support multiple languages or have their own specific environment. But it's all React and TypeScript. It'll be TypeScript versus JavaScript. All right, so let's go ahead and just see what we get. All right, so it always takes a minute. So while it's sort of doing its rendering, I can show you around a little bit in here. So this is the name. You can see it gives it a title based on whatever it is you're building. Of course, it loves the concept. It's so flattering. Then you have this. This will be sort of a history. So it'll be a running history. We don't have any yet, so I can't show you. You can always hide this. So the preview is going to show up here. And this is sort of the main area where you see what gets generated. So you can hide that always if you want to see it and just click to come back. This is a refresh. So if you feel like it's not working, or sometimes if you have once you get into multiple screens, when you get to the third screen, maybe you haven't built navigation in yet, so you can't go back to the first one. So if you refresh, then it should go back to the first one. This up here will give you a list of any of the different sort of files that are created, the different screens. They might have unique URLs. Sometimes they'll all be in a single page, just depending on how it gets generated. This is the code mode, which I'll show you in a second, that we can go to. And then here's Superbase and GitHub, which we'll get into, inviting other people to collaborate, as I talked about. And then obviously upgrade, give you more superpowers, and then publish. We'll publish it to the web. And you can either publish it to a subdomain, which it'll create of Lovable, or you can add your custom domain in, and that this is actually a fairly new feature. So you can actually have them sort of, set up all the hosting and stuff for you. All right, so here's what we have. So I love this concept. So networking for product managers, welcoming homepage, intuitive form, etc. All right, so let's see what we've got here. Now, if you go in and do it now, based on, I don't know if anyone's doing this simultaneously. If anyone tried to build a full app, I guarantee this would not have been blue. This would have been a different color because it would error. 9 times out of 10, when you create multiple screens, you get an error. So that's why I like to say, let's start with this screen, right? And what's cool about this is it'll actually sort of prompt you in terms of what you might want to do next, right? So here you can see we've got a nice landing page, even has some like content, and then our form here, so we can have our name and our role, how much experience we have, even has sort of a drop down, what industries you might want to work for, what your key skills are, and then some other things. And then you can go in, and then it even has some stuff of like, why would you want to do this through us? So that's pretty slick. Now, nothing's going to work if I click it. Oh, it says it created a profile, but it didn't. But it's showing us it built the whole UI.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the basics. Are there any questions so far about any of this stuff? Sorry, I should open the chat so I can see.
Drew, I wanted to mention something, and this is why it's so good to have these. Our tech team left a few comments about just like security stuff. So Pablo on our team had said we should consider adding instructions for security and maintainability in the prompts from the very beginning. So, I mean, I don't know, it needs to be in the very first prompt, but like at what point do you think we need to consider like people's data, or add instructions for security, how to understand user data, stuff like that? Like, should it be this early on?
I think the more you can set in the beginning, the better, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if you're saying like, we need to make sure this is like SOC2 compliant or things like that, you can try. I don't know if it's going to work.
Right.
And if you want to say like, but if it is a priority that it has security and that there's certain things that it should avoid, you'd want to mention them. It's probably going to default create code, and I'll show you the code in a second here, that is like, has the main sort of security holes somewhat good. Obviously, from that example that you gave earlier, they can be hacked. People can find the code. And the other thing to remember is when you create this in the free account, like I'm doing now, everything shows up by default in community, and anyone can see your code, right? So that's one thing, is like, if you're going to build something that you want to deploy and you want people to see, most definitely sign up so that you can have a private project. Let's look at the code so we can see. So you just toggle this code mode, and then this will change from the actual UI over to code. So you can see what it looks like. It's importing these sort of React things. You could tell it like if there's certain libraries you don't want it to use, things like that. But you can see it's fairly robust. Now, if you don't know what all this is, don't worry, you don't have to. That's the beauty of this. But if you do, you can see, it's creating an array here of some data to store the form data. These are the industries. And then we have like all of our components are going to be in here. These are our UI components that it has. And again, if you have a design system, literally you just hand this over to your devs and they can change it. The components.json or the package.json tells you everything that it's importing to use. So these are all the libraries. So if there's certain libraries that you're concerned about or versions, you can tweak these. So there's lots you can do if you know what you need to do. But that's a good note, is like what to include in the beginning, what not to include. One of the things is the authentication. I found that if you do it too late, it's messy if you add the authentication in too late. If you add it in too early, this is a type of security. You don't need to do it. I wouldn't do it in the first prompt, but now that we have the screen, if we said, okay, we want to make sure that when they do this, it creates an account and then they can sign in after that, and you'll do it. All right, so this is all good, right? But it doesn't, all this data, right? Like all these industries are they're hard-coded, which is not a good practice, right? If we save the data, it says we saved it, but where would it have saved it to? Nowhere, right? So one of the nice things about Lovable is it has this tight integration with Superbase. If anyone's familiar with Firebase, which is Google's product, Firebase is like a live real-time database that is unstructured. So you basically save the user, like if I were to save this, it would just save like an array of the industries they were interested in, right? Superbase is a live real-time database, which means anytime any data gets changed, anyone else who's linked up to it, it will show them the changes in real time. So it's a great way to sort of sync up. It uses WebSockets to connect, so it's like live data. So it's awesome. It's powerful. Both Superbase and Firebase are. The difference with Superbase and Firebase is that Superbase is a structured database. It's in what we call an RDBMS, a relational database management system. And so because of that, it will have lookup tables and it will have references. So the difference would be like these interests, there would be another table in here that would store all these that anyone could change if they wanted to update, add, remove. And then anyone who has links to them, it will just create a link to those things. So if I ever want to change SaaS to spell it out, because they're finding out people don't know what that means, software as a service, then I could change this title, and then everywhere where the user had it linked, it would then change that value, right? In a non-structured database, it won't do that. So I'm going to go ahead and make the connection here. Superbase. So I'm going to connect a project. So then you choose your organization. Now I've already created this. If you haven't signed into Superbase or haven't created an account, it'll prompt you to do that now as well. So we're going to create a new project. All right, so now I'm in Superbase. So this is like a database software. So I'm going to change the project name. We're going to call this, what did I call it? I called it like, we'll just call it PM networking. And then you can create your own password. I'll just use this. And then you can have, certain security things. If it doesn't matter for you, you can just leave the defaults if you don't know what these mean for now. And then at some point, let your data team know what you did. And then you can leave these all as defaults and then go ahead and create a new project. So it's using Postgres on the background if anyone cares. I'm going to save this so we can use it again. No. That's a different one. Okay, so now I have this all set up. These are API keys that you can use. You don't have to worry about that. Lovable automatically makes the connection. And then if you go in here, you can see like the tables that are created. Now, there are no tables yet because we haven't built anything, as well as going in and edit the SQL and look at the database and do all kinds of stuff. But again, we don't need to do any of that stuff just yet. Let's see here. I think. All right, so they're provisioning. Okay, so now it's done. Okay, so table editor, no tables. SQL editor, you can type SQL. I'll show you what SQL is. You're going to have to kind of learn to hack SQL a little bit, but you don't have to write it. You just have to know how to read it. And the beauty of SQL is it's very readable. All right, so now we've got a database and it should be connected. Let's see what happened here. Should be, let's close it and refresh and see if that connection happened. It may, because we created a new one, I might have to add the connection, but we'll find out in a second. Manage Superbase. Okay, so it did not, but now we can connect a project and I should be able to choose my database. And now it's connecting. Bada boom, bada bing. All right. All right, so now store and use real data. So that's what we're going to do. So let's say, let's plug this into our Superbase database so that when a user enters information, it saves it to a profiles table. It's also very easy to change the design. If you don't like the colors and things, you can say, or the fonts or whatever, simple prompts will let you do that. All right, so what it's going to do is going to say, okay, I can do this. Let's have a look at what we need to do, okay? So, and this is where like you need to sort of learn a little tiny bit of technical stuff, just a little bit. So create table. So you can see how readable it is. Create table is going to create a table in your database. And then this is the name. Public is just the space it's creating in, which means anyone who has access to the database can read it. And that's fine because they need to have a password to access the database at all. So public sounds scary, but it's not actually public. It just means it's not like an admin table that only certain types of users can access. And then it's going to create an identifier, which we need to do. And it's going to create a user identifier, right? That's going to link to the auth table. So it automatically knew that this was going to link to the logins so that once they create it, we can easily just link this up and get a password, or they can log in with Google. You can actually integrate all those sort of third-party authentication tools. And then we have sort of the different tables that we want to store based on experience, current role, interests, industries, etc. Now, a couple of the things that I see, I'm okay with the skills because the user was entering them, but I might want to add something later, a table where users can, type in skills and there's a finite number of skills, because this can get really messy if everyone has a different skill. And also you can't search for it. So like a recruiter can't go through and say, show me everyone who has experience working in Lovable, right? Well, you hope they spelled it right when they entered it and you hope it's there. So later we might want to create a specific table so that people can look it up. And likewise, industries, even though it came from the text, it's still not creating a lookup table. So, and then it's creating all these policies, right? And these are just saying who can edit what, right? Users can create their own profiles, update their own profiles, delete their own profiles, etc. So it all looks very scary, but for the most part, it looks pretty good for now. We may want to make changes later. In fact, we're going to. So let's go ahead and do this. The good thing about this is it's not immutable, right? If you want to change your mind on how something works, you absolutely can. Okay, so something happened. Current role is a reserved word. Okay, so current role is used for roles like access roles, like for permissions inside of Postgres. So it's going to change the name from current role to role title. Okay, so that's fine. All right, so yes, let's go ahead and do that. And the beauty is we didn't need to know that. There was an error that was thrown by Postgres, but Superbase handled it. And so did, between Superbase and Lovable, they worked it out. So we didn't have to. All right, so now it's running it. And then when it's done, we'll try entering our information and see if it saves. All right, so it's adding the security. Since we have all that security in terms of users can edit their own profile and stuff like that, which you want to have with this, it's going to have to write some of the auth code in there. And then later we'll have to add the login and stuff, but we don't have to do that right now. And once we do this, we can come back and play around with this, but I want to show you how to connect it to GitHub too, so you can look at sort of how that workflow is if you're going to integrate with devs.
I did want to just point out, sorry,
yeah,
that we had a question from Ebony. Maybe we can kind of go through this before we go to GitHub, but why, she asked why we need both Superbase and GitHub.
Good question. Good question. I was just going to explain that. Explain what GitHub is. So GitHub, let me go to GitHub, is what devs use to track all of their code, right? So with GitHub, there's all kinds of things you can do. Like here's one. So I built this thing in Lovable that allows you. So one of the things that I've found with consulting is that devs sometimes they like to, or not devs, sorry, execs have these high level goals. We need to make this money. And then those of us that are PMs on the ground figuring out how to translate that into the work that we actually do, there's always huge gaps in a lot of organizations. So I built something that would take high level goals, break it down into lower goals for other people to do at the mid-level and to track, like directors, and then break those down into what actually the PMs and the designers and the engineers should be focusing on. So that's what this app is. And you can see I've pushed it here, and this is all the code. So what devs will do is every time they go to work on this code, they will actually check it out into their development environment. They'll write their code, and then they'll put in what they call a pull request. And that pull request says, hey, I did a bunch of changes. Is that okay? Can these be pushed into the regular code base? And usually someone on the engineering team will look through and say, yep, this is good. There's no conflicts. This shouldn't break anything. And then they'll accept it. And then it does a merge and merges the code. So this is how they work. This allows everyone to make changes in the code without overwriting each other. And it allows everyone, and if they do overwrite each other, it allows you to manage the conflicts and see where they are and figure out which code you want to keep and remove. So it's a huge part of the dev cycle. In addition, we plug in a lot of tools into here that allow you to deploy directly to your wherever your development environment is, your production environment, and oftentimes it'll do checks on the code. It can run like unit tests, it can run security checks, it can do all this stuff. So this is where engineers sort of center all of their code and manage all of their code. So that's what GitHub is for. It's really to sort of sync it up and manage it. And so we want to get into their level. Oh yeah, you can see, look, it's got, it actually added the whole authentication system. So we can see here, so it added all this. It added the database and the authentication system and everything, right? So now it gives me the login and don't have account to sign up. That I have to create an account. All right, so this isn't what I really want. I want it to default to, oh, I see, that's the auth. So let's go back to the home page. Okay, so it was just showing me the new screen it created so that I knew. Oh no, it's forwarding me to Auth because it's saying I can't even look at the home screen. Okay, this is great, but I want users to see the home screen before they are authorized. And
Damn,
then they
to
can,
compliment robot.
right, then they can create an account from the home page. Okay, let's see if it gets it.
I think there was a question
Oh,
about
there we go.
pages. Did we add that to the Q&A, Michael? The question about pages, total pages for an app?
I don't think I saw that one.
Okay, I'll add it in.
Okay.
Okay, we're getting a little bit close to time here. So
Right.
are we okay to kind of talk about a couple of important considerations that our tech team internally kind of wanted to bring to the front before we start talking about next steps?
Let me quick show the GitHub connection and then we can go, right? So when you connect GitHub, right, I'm already logged in. So you connect your project to, I think, oh, it's not allowing me because it's currently working. So I got to wait to do that. All right, why don't you go ahead? I'll show that later.
Sure. Okay, so we did have a couple of hot tips from some of our tech folks who have been working with Vibe Coding for a while. So from one of our tech team members, Pablo, he mentioned a good tip is to add instructions for security and maintainability in the prompts from the very beginning.
Oh yeah, that's what I was asking Drew before. So we
Yeah.
briefly went over that one a little bit. Like, yeah, so pretty early on, and we see that it just did some of that already by connecting it. But yeah.
And then the other was asking for documentation for every new module and feature created to give context for future updates and maintenance.
That's a great tip.
Mm-hmm. And then from Christian, another best practice was don't ask for the entire product you want to build in just one prompt. Break it into a list with the necessary parts and use it to build prompting one by one, which helps also build the systems thinking capability in you as a vibe coder.
Yep, that's a good note. It's a great note, actually.
I'm sorry. If I miss something, I'm multitasking. So I apologize if I've duplicated information. Okay, so Drew, I do want to kind of cover some of our next steps in order to connect our prototype to development. Is there anything like that you want to make sure that we cover in this stage of the workshop before we kind of wrap with some of our kind of forward-looking steps?
Yep. Real quick, so you can see it worked, it fixed it, right? And then you sign up to save profile. So it got that fixed as I wanted it. Note that here there's you can toggle the tablet and to mobile. So if you're building responsive, you can always use this sort of button to change the device. And then I'm going to real quick connect to GitHub. It should allow me to do that now. Yeah, so I can connect project. My Lovable GitHub organizations. Yes. Continue. Connect. All right, so you can see it created this GitHub. And then if I want, I can go view it on GitHub. So here's my project. And if you change anything in here, so I can go into this editor and I can say, let's view and go to the editor. I can say home page. That's just a comment for anyone who doesn't know that in HTML. And then committing changes will push it into Git. And then if I go back into Lovable, if I switch to code mode here, and I should see in my index HTML my little comment up at the top. This is the home page. So you can see anything you change, it's two-way sync. So whatever the devs do and push to the the thread, the the GitHub, then everything will be there. All right. So I think we're good. We can go on to more questions or whatever. Do you have other questions we want to address? I mean, that's mainly it. Once you've done that, then the devs can pull it in. They can do whatever they need, push it, and then when you log back into Lovable, it's all there. And so you can add new screens and do all that, and you can change how it, how it pushes and how all that works. You're able to edit that as well. And if you want to go to a different branch, for example, you can do that, and then the devs can sort of pull in your branch when it's ready and they've checked it for merge conflicts and security and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Drew. Hannah, you're muted, but do you want to go through, we can give a few more minutes to ask any last questions, and you can go through a few things and then we'll take those questions.
Sure. I knew that I was going to mute myself at some point.
Yeah.
I knew it. Take a shot when. Okay. So yes. So I did want to just address, we had a question from Aiden about talking about publishing and sharing the app today. We will be kind of wrapping up with that. It looks like we've actually answered most of the Q&A as we went. So we're just going to focus on talking about next steps towards the end. But before we get to that, I did want to take a few moments here just to kind of talk to everybody while we still have you. I know that we've got 15 minutes left, so a lot of folks are going to start peeling off for the next meeting. But before you guys go, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. If you loved this workshop or if you got any value out of it, we'd love to see you at our next event. We're holding one on the product manager this coming month, which will be a panel discussion on how to build what AI can't. So that's going to be all about differentiating yourself in the age of AI when tools like this exist and so many people can build apps with similar functionality. We'll also be discussing how to create some standout user experiences and just like kind of really lean into the human insights that you can't generate as easily. So we're going to be opening registration for that very soon. If you haven't already subscribed to our newsletter, you can subscribe at the link that Michael will be sharing in the chat here. And if you haven't already followed Katie's newsletter, I really recommend checking out the CTO Club. The publication is fantastic. She's got a great newsletter. The link to check that out is also going to be in the chat here. Lots of great insights there. And Katie is just a force to be reckoned with. So make sure you follow her on LinkedIn as well. And if you enjoyed the things that we covered today and you would like to keep moving forward, obviously we can only scratch the surface in the time that we've allotted. Drew is also offering a full vibe coding course on Maven. So he'll be going into more detail on all of this over 8 live sessions. So if you feel like you've got the taste and now you really want the meal, you can go ahead and check that out as well. Michael's posting a link to the course. And if you signed up from our workshop, we're giving $100 off of the full cost of the course. Thanks to Drew for doing that. The next cohort will be running from August 4th to August 29th. I believe we might have we'll publish the link as soon as we can. And I believe there might be a code for that as well. Okay, and then the
Good
last
vibes.
thing before...
Good vibes.
Oh,
good vibes.
Yeah, sorry. Code is good vibes. Good vibes is the promo code to get the $100 off on the course. And then the last thing before we get to our last section, we really love feedback. This is our very first time doing this format of a sort of seminar and workshop, hands-on workshop thing. So this is new for us, and we would really love some feedback from you guys as participants. So if you can take a few seconds to let us know what you thought of today's session. We love to hear the constructive criticism as well as the kind words. Check out the form that Michael is linking below. And lastly, let's just talk about kind of next steps. Like now we've got our prototype. We know how to connect it with GitHub. Let's talk a little bit about what publishing looks like or sharing if you are solo publishing or if you're using this as a collaboration tool.
Yep. So when you go to publish, you have a few options. This is actually fairly new, this review security. So it'll tell you if there's warnings, and it's giving me a couple of database warnings. So it'll open up Superbase and tell me there's something wrong. Detects functions where search parameters. OTP expiry exceeds recommended threshold. Some of these matter, some of them don't. Again, when you get into publishing, if you're just publishing a prototype and looking to validate something, that's fine. But publishing is like you're putting it live on the interwebs. So you want to be careful and make sure you check things out. There's also security review. So it's going to go through and look for any potential vulnerabilities. And then when you're done, you publish. And when you publish, you'll get this link here. You can actually edit it if you want. If you don't want this role match network, if you want to change the name, you can do that. So it's just telling me what it's doing while it's doing it. This is a pretty neat feature. I've actually never used this before. Critical security issue identified. Missing RLS policy for insert operation. And again, once you get into this, you're getting into some pretty technical stuff. So you're going to want probably to have someone. You can try, like it will tell you there's a link here to implement the fixes for these different things. So it's saying here's, these are the problems. This is the plan. Okay, we want to fix the insert policy. We want to do this. So you can go ahead and implement it. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And that's generally true with all the recommended fixes. So sometimes you have to sort of keep trying. One little trick that I'll tell you when you're debugging things in here, it's going to change this table, is if you go into the view of your browser and open, there's a developer thing. Can you see that? Let me share my full screen so can you see the drop down? Okay.
Yep.
If you go into the, let's switch. So you go into view, developer, and then if you go into really any of these, but developer tools, this opens up this sort of little section, and specifically the console. So it'll show you errors that are happening, and the console will give you errors. And so sometimes you can actually use these errors and paste them into here, and it'll help you to fix it. So sometimes it's on the client if you're ever having troubles with debugging. It does look at the client more now, but it didn't used to. Let's go ahead and change the tables.
Oh, it fixed it itself.
We'll see. Not done yet. We haven't tested that.
Okay.
But once you're done, then you can go ahead and publish it. And that's going to push it out. Yeah, it failed.
Okay.
Subqueries and so. And again, this stuff gets complicated. So, most of the time I recommend people, all right, so now we just shipped, and then I can copy this link, and then I can share it with whomever, and they just paste it in their website or click on the link, and they'll see our app. It's pretty fun. If you're like a designer or someone and you've never built an app, like that's a good feeling.
It feels great.
Yeah. The power. Use it wisely though.
Thank you so much, Drew. That was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I think a lot of people are so curious about the PRD, the resources that you've seen here. We will get these to you. The link to the Maven course, the PRD that Drew shared at the beginning, the recording. We will share all of that. Hannah, do you want to wrap anything up, or are there any questions? I'm trying to see if there's any that we didn't get to. I know there were some tool questions.
We've got a couple of minutes left. We can chat through some tools, and we had someone bring up Base 44. I
think Jennifer's question is good about fine tuning. Do you want me to read that one out?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jennifer said, how do you easily fine tune after the initial build? For my prototype, it was easy to get the first version, but when I started sending through multiple detailed requirements, Lovable would start automatically changing components I didn't ask it to change, or the code would break. How do you manage this without having to actually open the code?
Yeah. It's tricky. I think for me, that's why I'm always very careful to like go screen by screen by screen so that I'm working in that code specifically. You can try telling and say, look, without changing things in this area, I want to make this happen. So sometimes you have to explicitly tell it, like, I don't want to do this, or I only want to change this component, which does require kind of understanding where things are a little bit. So I can show you kind of the main overview of how this works. So the app TSX and main TSX are like the main sort of application pieces, right? So main is what starts, and then it pulls in this app. TSX stands for TypeScript, and that's really all it is. And you can see each of these are all components, right? And then routes are the navigation. So you can see the route path, we have index and auth. So if you go into components in UI, I think it's in here. No, they're not. Where is it? Where are the routes stored? Pages, here we go. It's under pages. So we have auth, so that's that one. And then we have index, right? And then you can look up here and it'll show you at the top of every file what your inputs are. So if you want to make sure to focus only on like one specific element, you can say, you know, I want to edit the component/UI/button so that it's like this, right? Usually you don't have to get that defined, but usually it's sort of the pages, like make sure to work on the auth file only, and I want to make these changes. You know, it's just like all AI is, when you get into the weeds of it, it gets a little squirrely. And so you kind of have to do the best you can. And sometimes it's going to do those things, and hopefully it just gets better over time. But, you know, if you try and contain it within the prompt, that's the best sort of way I can give you to sort of keep it under wraps a little bit, or in control.
Thank you. Another quick question here was, can we use other databases, for example, Postgres, etc.?
Yes, and it gets a little more complicated.
Okay.
Right? So once you want to integrate other things, you can integrate third-party APIs. You can integrate, it's actually pretty easy to integrate ChatGPT and other things. There's a whole like sort of plug-in ability in here that you can use that allows you to sort of link to other things. But it is going to require you setting that up and making sure that, you know, it's authenticated to it, and then they can get in, and you're storing passwords. You know, you want to make sure, like if you're logging into a remote database, you want to save your passwords in a secure way for that authentication between the app and the database. So you need to make sure to do. So it gets a little more devy when you start doing that. But I'm assuming this is from a technical person if they want to do that sort of low level type of thing.
Okay. And then one more from Lauren was wondering if you have any guidelines around total pages for an app. Is there a max to try to stick to as far as how many pages when building in here? Meaning, I guess she means in Lovable.
Yeah. There's not like a hard number, and the reality is with every app is it's going to start expanding out. Sometimes, you know, like this thing here where we have the auth and that page, sometimes you can have like the whole app in a single page, right? That's like the whole idea of a progressive web app, is it's basically one page and it's just loading different components based on the context. So there's no hard and fast rule for how many screens you should create. The key is just, you want to make sure the more screens you create, the more management can get crazy, right? Because when you make one change somewhere, it might change something else. One of the things that I found too that it tends to do is like here where we have these industries. Let's say I have these pulling from a database, and then somewhere else I have a list for, I have another screen, say for recruiters to search, or for maybe a user to sort of look for companies themselves. And it'll have a list of these, but it'll be hard coded and it won't come from the database. So sometimes in these other pages, you need to make sure that they're all using the same connection. So the bigger it gets, the more you need to start managing it and controlling how it's doing everything. And the more complicated it gets. So just something to be aware of, but there is no sort of upper limit. You can go as much as you want. You saw how many components there are. There's tons of components. There's only 2 pages as of yet. The other thing is a page might end up getting broken down into multiple components, which you can absolutely do. So And it'll tell you too. It'll say, hey, this is getting too long. Would you like to break it up?
Right.
And it usually does it in a fairly intuitive way, which is nice.
Cool.
All right. Well, that brings us to time. I just want to give another huge thank you, first of all, to all of our participants today. The engagement in the chat has been phenomenal. We are so excited to hear that folks got a lot of value out of this session. I want to give a huge thank you to Katie for being part of this and for working with us and like representing the CTO Club. I'm super excited for folks to get introduced to this fantastic resource. And of course, to Drew, for being such an amazing resource, for volunteering your time and expertise. And I'm really hoping that folks are able to connect with Drew in his Maven course. If you liked this, you're going to love the content there. And also a big thanks to Michael Mordak, because he is the mastermind behind all of our events. And we hope to bring many more like this to you. Speaking of which, please make sure to fill out our feedback form so that we can continue to iterate on this format and offer some great non-sales pitchy, awesome value-packed workshops for you. Thank you so much for being part of this, and hope to see you at our next event.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks all.